Hey, Charles from GMAT Ninja here. Welcome to MBA Spotlight 2026 GMAT panel. We're going to talk about things that kill your GMAT score. I think the title says 3 things. We're going to talk about a bunch of things. Really kind of special configuration of this panel. We've got 2 of my favorite test prep experts. We also have 2 of my favorite GMAT conquerors, so people who've been where you are right now, got through the test, made big improvements. I'm going to do introductions quickly, and then we'll start getting into the meat of the discussion. So test prep experts today: Allison Bell, GMAT instructor at Manhattan Prep; legendary Target Test Prep founder, CEO, Scott Woodbury-Stewart. We have Pearl. So Pearl, we did a debrief about 3 or 4 months ago. So she went from a 585 to a 685 on the GMAT. If you want to see her full story, we'll toss that into the chat. So we've got a full 45-minute discussion on YouTube featuring her story. So she speaks 4 languages, is going to INSEAD, the MIM program. So amazing, amazing story. Went through a lot of really interesting stuff along the way. And finally, we have Scott Blondin. Today, we're going to call him Iowa Scott. He and I are both from college towns in Iowa. So he went from a 505 on his first practice test to a 705. Part of what's fascinating about Iowa Scott: engineer, got his butt kicked on the quant at first. So this is a guy who can do math at a really, really high level. I'd be willing to bet that Scott is better at math than I am. And he got his butt kicked, eventually got a 705, got there, but went through some interesting stuff along the way. So we will get into that as the conversation goes on. If you are here live, please toss your questions into that Q&A feature here in the platform. We're not going to get to everything, but we will do our very best. All right, with that, let me pick on Iowa Scott first. So I just want you to give us your biggest score killer. So the misstep you made along the way that was killing your score. Obviously, you got over it, you improved. But what's a score killer that comes to mind that you want people listening or watching not to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you kind of hit on it, Charles. With that engineering background and being confident in math before starting GMAT Quant, initially I was kind of rushing things and going through problems and just processes too fast and not really checking my work. And that let a lot of kind of careless mistakes compound and really just tank my score. So really just needed to start focusing on going slow and checking my work and making sure everything was kind of perfect before moving on, to prevent those careless errors.
And Scott, was there anything in particular that really worked for you? Because sometimes changing habits is so hard. And I'm pretty sure that Allison and TTP Scott are going to nod grimly at this, because we see it from students all the time where we say, hey, stop doing careless stuff, but then it's really hard to change. So what was it for you that really made the difference? Were you writing notes to yourself on your desk? Were you hitting yourself every time you made a, like, how'd you handle it?
Yeah, so I kind of had a process where I would read the question a couple times and then start my work, my flow of the kind of answering the problem, but then check each step. And there was kind of a point where you had to be very disciplined, or I had to be very disciplined in doing that every time. When I didn't do that is when I would get into problems. So it was kind of practice of solving problems, but it was more practice of the discipline of sticking with that set process for every single problem was kind of what eventually fixed kind of quant careless errors.
And how long do you think it took you to break through?
Probably 2 or 3 months of like really solid disciplined work, to be honest, especially on test day. I think test day, under that stress, that's when the processes and the discipline can sometimes go away. And that's when you need it most, obviously. So it takes a lot of kind of hard work and discipline to really stay focused and locked in on that.
I love it. Thank you, Scott. Pearl, I want to pick on you next. So biggest score killer that you encountered along the way that obviously you fixed eventually.
I think what I say just adds to what Scott says, which is discipline. So I initially didn't have a tracker for my errors. And when I started tracking my errors regularly, religiously, I would say, is when I really saw like that jump and I could see exactly where my mistakes are. What didn't I understand? So that would be the biggest, like I plead everyone to make their trackers.
And then once you made your tracker, like did you immediately feel a difference in the improvement? Was it something you noticed in your practice test? Like, take us through a little bit of what exactly that did for you.
So the biggest 2 things, like I said, Charles, was that number 1 was I noticed how many of my mistakes were just careless errors, right? Because GMAT isn't quantum physics. I mean, it's not that tough to solve the math or the English questions, but you're so oh my God, I know this, or oh my God, I don't know this, and you make such silly mistakes. So I noticed that, and that forced me in the exam to take a moment. So it inadvertently built a second habit of, checking my work. And the second one was I understood that there are some concepts and that no matter how much I do, I can't fix it. So I have to focus on fixing or perfecting what I already know. So those are two habits that this one habit built.
Perfect. Well, I love it. Thank you, Pearl. All right, Allison, I want to pick on you. You're welcome to riff off of what Pearl and Iowa Scott have been saying, or if you have another score killer that you see out of your students, feel free to fire away with that.
Yeah, I think that one thing that's really important to moving your score is being open-minded about adopting new approaches and willing to try new things. And so I think that resistance to change or resistance to trying something that feels uncomfortable can be a big score killer for students. In particular, two things that are just really hard for many students to come around to are, one, using alternative approaches to algebra when solving quant problems. The sooner that you're able to embrace that, the sooner you're going to see your score start to move. And two, being willing to make the hard decisions that are necessary to keep you on pace with time management. So I count myself in the camp of, when I was studying for the GMAT, being someone who was reluctant to guess on a problem in order to keep myself on pace. And I see that very common with students. And so, I think just being willing to adopt those new habits that maybe weren't what you needed to be successful on a different test in the past, but that do get folks to a top score is important. And resisting those changes is one of the things that holds people back.
Awesome. TTP, Scott, let me pick on you last, partly because I know we've done enough of these things together over the years. Like, I know you've got plenty of ideas, even if everybody else stole the first 4 on your list. I know you've got more, so fire away.
Yeah, no, it's such a great topic for people because it falls under the genre of what are these things that you might be doing that's silently holding you back. And that stinks, like it'd be good to know, hey, I should do this, I shouldn't do that. I think for me, probably the most common one is trying to force speed. There's two things going on. Obviously, the test is timed. So students are always worried about completing questions in the allotted time. And, no one really wants to be studying for the test. They want to get onto applications. They want to get on to business school. So take those two, facts together. And what I see people doing is trying to go fast. Like, let me do a quant question in X minutes and X seconds from day 1, hour 1, practice session 1. And it seems so logical until you take a step back and look at anywhere else in the universe. Like, my favorite analogy is playing the piano. Like, imagine if you sat down to play some Elton John song this afternoon, and you had never played the piano, and your instructor was like, come on, chop, chop, let's get the pace right. I mean, 10 years from now, you'd still be trying to play that song. That's not the way the human brain works. Like, you just don't go in and play, November Rain at the pace that Axl Rose plays at November Rain, right? But if you go slowly and methodically and you build your skills, all of a sudden one day you wake up and you're playing at the appropriate pace. And there's a million bad analogies I could give you, like running. Like, what if your coach was like, hey, I need you faster, Scott, run faster. You're like, well, I'm trying as fast as I can. I can't run that fast. And he's like, you got to run. You'd be like, what am I doing? What are you doing? How you would get faster, obviously, is you would get better. You would get better at running. You'd get better at stronger. How would you get faster at the piano? You get better at playing the piano. It's a million examples. Same thing with being fast on the GMAT. Your speed is a side effect, a very well-wanted byproduct of being skilled and knowledgeable and efficient and effective. And that actually comes from going slowly, especially at first, right? So I would say that's the biggest thing that I have to coach people on is, yes, you will get faster. And yes, time is important and being efficient is important. But the way you get there is to actually slow down and build a deep skill set. And that actually sort of hit a lot on what both Pearl and Scott said. Scott, you picked up on two things. you had to fix careless mistakes, right? But yeah, sometimes it is like, hey, I need to be more careful. And a lot of times in slowing down, what you're actually doing is you're building a mastery that's deep enough that those things that seem like careless mistakes could have been just, not as deep of a knowledge pool as you thought you had. And by actually slowing down and recognizing them, you get faster because you get better. And hence, parallel error log is really important for that, right? You look at it and you say, hey, quantitatively, statistically, what does the data show? Oh, I could get this right 99 times out of 100. It probably was a careless mistake. Okay, because a careless mistake means statistically, you wouldn't get this wrong 100 times. I mean, you get it right 100 times and one time you get it wrong because you flipped the sign or something. But, if the error log shows, hey, I get this wrong, 8 times out of 10, then you have the data to show you, maybe it's not a careless mistake, right? Maybe I need to actually work on those fundamentals more.
All right. So, Scott, you kind of preempted the question that I'd already picked out. And I think you answered this in part. I kind of want to hear from Pearl and Iowa Scott on this. So as questions get harder in difficulty when prepping for those questions, like how do you go about that process of going from maybe working on easier questions, trying to stamp out those careless errors, working your way up the ladder to harder questions? So what are the common mistakes that people make? And Pearl and Iowa Scott, whichever you would like to jump in here, I'm curious to hear if anything funky happened to you along the way as you were kind of trying to climb up in difficulty level. Like, did you have some of the issues that TTP Scott mentioned or something else?
I'll go first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it, Pearl.
I think it's exactly what TTP Scott mentioned. You think you have mastered this concept, and you immediately try to go for a harder question, and you realize, oh, I actually don't know this as well. Because if you did know this as well, no question is too tough for you. So if you build that depth in the subject or in whatever skill they're testing, a hard question is at most like a head scratch. It's about how they're asking the question rather than the information that they're asking about. So that's what I would say.
Iowa Scott?
Yeah, I mean, Pearl just said it. It's about how they're asking the question. I think with hard questions, for me, especially when I first started getting into them and I was focusing on hard questions, the way they were asking the questions kind of influenced the way I was thinking about it. So I was digging into it more sometimes than I really needed to. And then that kind of affected other questions too. So I found when I was focused so much on hard questions and learning those, I would end up kind of messing up medium questions because I thought there was more to them, or even easy questions because I thought there was just more there that I was missing, and you're spending so much time looking for something that just isn't there. So yeah, I think just staying focused and trusting your gut. You have to be able to move on from questions sometimes, especially hard questions. If you don't know it, you just don't know it and you have to move on. So
related a little bit, I think. So Aman, and again, apologies for mispronunciation of any names. Been studying for the GMAT for a year, reached a score of 595, 3 tries already. Consistently doing mocks, average score there is 655. I don't think the rest of it is necessarily showing up on the screen here. Long story shortish, main problem is the data insights section. I can just reach 15 to 16 questions and then have to guess mark the other questions. So how can I improve here? How can I improve in general? Yes, making quant and English errors as well, but this looks to me like in part, so obviously lots of different things could be going on here to keep somebody at a 595. As soon as I hear somebody say, yeah, I'm only getting to 15 or 16 questions, my first thought is that this might be something that has more to do with sort of how this person is thinking about allocation of their time resources. Allison, I might pick on you on this one because I obviously you see tons of this sort of thing. Somebody's struggling to finish the sections on time. What's your advice for somebody that's in that situation?
Sorry, just had something pop up here.
I got the same pop up.
Yeah, same here. And
how do I
can't
make
seem
it
to
go
get rid of
away?
Yeah.
I will just fill it in.
We'll fill it in.
Alrighty. Okay, sorry about that. Now it's click saying enter event.
Okay.
That sounds scary. Can
back.
y'all hear me? I might just talk.
Yeah, I think that worked.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. I filled out a little survey and I think we're back.
Yeah, we're back.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so I think in addition to all the advice that's been shared about getting better in order to get faster, that's all excellent advice. I think it sounds like this person needs to develop a more balanced time management strategy. So what we teach our students is to kind of section off both data insights and quant into chunks of problems so that you have a benchmark for where you should be when you're 4 problems in, where you should be when you're 8 problems in, 12 problems in, using just the average time of 2 minutes per problem. And rather than just kind of adopting the mindset of doing as much as you can and then letting the rest of it go, you want to take charge of your own time management is kind of the first thing. And so if you've done 4 problems and you look at the clock and you're 3 or 4 minutes behind, then that means that you need to skip a question in order to regain control over your time management. The benefit of that is twofold. First, the GMAT score that you get reflects where you are at the end of the section, your performance at that last question. And so if you don't even get to the last question, there's a huge score penalty for unanswered questions. And similarly, if you are guessing on those last several questions, that is slowly pulling down the difficulty that the GMAT thinks that you can do and really tanking your score. So you could have 4 misses, but just strategically allocate them throughout the section in order to regain control of your time management. And your score will be different than the score that you're seeing now because you're getting to the end of the section, because you're not ending with a string of misses. So a benchmark approach to your time management can take the same performance as you continue to work on trying to get faster at those questions and be able to do more of them. Just kind of reallocate your efforts in a way that's more advantageous to you.
So live audience is doing a great job of kind of asking questions that build on each other. So this issue of time management, again, shows up disproportionately for people, I think, on data insights. This is a question that I think is related to that, but there's a little bit more to it, right? So I think a lot of people struggle on data insights. One thing I will say is average scores are lower on data insights. So 75 is the average score on data insights, 78 and 79 on quant and verbal respectively. So having a lower data insight score is normal. And yet anything you can do to improve it is obviously going to make you more competitive as you apply for MBAs. So I'm seeing a lot of questions come in about data insights in particular, and I'll pick on TTP Scott for this one. Yes, there's the issue of picking your battles that Allison just addressed, right? So, and I think Iowa Scott and Pearl kind of spoke to it a little bit as well. You don't want to get sucked into questions that are too hard for you. But more broadly, when most people struggle with timing on data insights, I think there's a good question here about how do you build automaticity? So yes, it's reps, yes, it's practice, but is there anything in particular, TTP Scott, that you would say is data insight specific strategy, things you can do to get better at these things that they're not math knowledge, right? It's not memorize exponent rules. I mean, that's in there a little bit, but it's much more about, okay, how do you get more automatic at processing graphs and tables and charts? So what would you recommend for somebody who's just struggling with that efficiency, automaticity in general?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And for me, it's pretty much analogous to what they would do for quant or for verbal. I mean, not identical because the skills are different, but the broad strategy is I think they have to get so good at it, the timing doesn't become an issue. As a million, for example, MSR strategies. But at the end of the day, if you're not skilled at the skills these questions demand of you, you're going to be slow. And Allison has some great ideas about timing on test day, which everyone should take to heart. But at the end of the day, like the test day timing can't save you. I mean, it can save you a little bit, right? But it's not going to save you to the degree that, that upstream work will. And one of the things people do, just thinking of that last student's comment, is you can do a blind review. And what's a blind review? Well, you get a question wrong. And before you look at the solution, take an hour, take 20 minutes, take 10 minutes. Can you solve it with zero time pressure, right? And if the answer is no, and if you have 40 of those, DI questions that you can't solve with unlimited time, well, that tells you something really useful. It's not really a timing issue. Again, it's a depth of knowledge, it's a skills, it's a content, it's an understanding issue, right? Because if you can't solve it with 7 days, you know, if next Tuesday you're still working on the question, it tells you it's not really a timing issue. It tells you it's a knowledge content issue. And that sends you, you know, further upstream to go back and work through the content, work through the strategies, work through the processes, right? Now, of course, if you could solve it with more time, that tells you something a little bit different, right? That maybe, yeah, you do need the things to be more automatized, more efficient. But again, and I think maybe, Charles, because the section is quote unquote newer, you know, I don't know, like we've always said quant verbal, right? Like, you know, it's more recent change to the data insights that maybe people are, I don't know, maybe they're not putting as much time into it. For me, it shouldn't be as challenging as it is. In fact, for me, I think maybe the quant verbal section should be more challenging, but clearly like that's not accurate because as you said, you know, people perform statistically worse on DI, but it could be too that, I don't know, maybe they don't put as much into it. You know, maybe they really drill down on the quant. I've seen that. They really drill down on the verbal, and those skills absolutely carry over to the DI section. But part of me feels like maybe they just need more time on the water with DI, right?
Could be. I think there's an instinct a lot of people have, and Iowa, Scott, and Prob, I'm curious to get your take on this next. I think when a lot of people study, there's the feeling when you study quant, better so when you study math, right? Hey, I'm going to go learn some exponent rules, drill some algebra problems. You feel like you're learning something, right? It feels really productive. I think it can feel less productive relatively when you're doing verbal. I just read a bunch of passages. What did I learn? And I think even less productive, or you see the benefit less clearly when you're doing data insights. I read a bunch of graphs and charts. I do that every day. What am I doing here? And I think for a lot of people, and something we see in the data, we see it in GMAT Club's data, we see it on our YouTube channel, we see people spending a lot more time on quant than on other things. So I think you might be onto something, Scott. I think sometimes it's, while I understand the process to improve on math, because that's something I've done before, I've never really encountered something like data insights before, so maybe I'm less inclined to spend my study time on it. Pearl and Iowa, Scott, I guess, and anything in particular, and feel free to pass on this because I'm putting you on the spot. I guess with data insights for either of you, was there anything in particular that really helped you break through, helped you feel more automatic with it, helped you with timing?
Yeah, I think for me, just practice. I think spending a lot of time with it, kind of like Scott said, just you have to spend time with it and do it a lot. But also just learning to kind of trust my process and trust my gut and then move on kind of helps with timing as well. I think DI, sometimes you're not exactly sure of, you know, if you got the right answer, especially for some of the DS questions, or for some of the other questions, there's a lot of information thrown at you and you're like, did I miss something? Did I not catch everything that is really being asked here? You've got to just kind of trust your process and keep moving through things. It's kind of the only way that I found I could improve, really.
Pearl, any thoughts? And feel free to pass. It's up to you.
No, actually, you know, I've tried a lot of different prep products, apart from Target Test Prep and Manhattan Prep, I think, because they were a bit out of my budget. I've tried a lot. And throughout, you will see a consistent idea that's being floated around is do the quant, do the verbal, leave the DI for the rest. You'll get it if you do quant and verbal. This is an idea that's thrown around very often in these spaces. I've seen it in, I'm not going to name any names, but I've seen it. I've been told this directly by many GMAT instructors. And so I'd say that is a very dangerous mindset to have. Because like you said, those skills don't actually translate that well if you don't practice them. So practice for sure, and don't leave it till the end. Do practice it equally.
Awesome. And TTP, Scott, that might speak to your point that maybe part of what we're seeing with more struggles on data insights is just if there is a lot of advice floating around out there, and I don't think, I mean, Allison and TTP, Scott, none of our companies are giving that advice to ignore data insights. Like we're certainly not the ones putting it out there. But if that is something people are absorbing from the internet, TTP, Scott, you might be spot on here that people just aren't investing as much as they need to, and that's part of what we're seeing. which is interesting.
Yeah, I've heard, especially at the inflection point between legacy GMAT and GMAT focus, like I think a lot of students sort of felt like it was integrated reasoning, right? And I don't even know if like people taking the test now remember integrated reasoning. It's like a movie from the 90s. Like we never even saw it, right? But I think that persisted a little bit. It was kind of a sticky idea. And I think integrated reasoning was significantly easier than data insights, right? So maybe some of that carried over. I don't know if you've seen that, Charles.
I don't think there's much carryover, just because if somebody's taking the GMAT now, I think most people watching are probably going, old GMAT, legacy GMAT, what are these old guys talking about? I think for most people that's in the distant enough past. I think you might be like at that point in time, kind of the 2023, 24 during the transition. Yeah. I think what I seem to see a lot of out there is just some deer in headlights around the data insights, understandably, right? It has 5 question types. Verbal has 2, quant has 1. That can be intimidating. The time pressure statistically is worse on data insights. Yes, it's fewer questions, but when we look at the data from GMAT, it actually says more people struggle with the timing on data insights than on the other sections. And I think maybe just the willingness to study it maybe hasn't quite caught up. So I guess for anybody watching, data insights is a weakness. I mean, a lot of what this boils down to, you're hearing it both from some test prep people and from students. Yeah, practice. Don't save it. I mean, it might be okay to save some of it for later because there is spillover from quant and verbal, but don't do less of it than the other sections if it's a weakness for you. Even if you want to sequence it as learn your quant foundations first if you need to. Okay, great conversation. Thank you everybody for that, because I think it's giving some interesting stuff. All right, really good one. And again, I'll pick on the students first with this. And again, you're welcome to pass. How to tackle the mental pressure during the exam. You don't know how you're doing until that score pops up at the end. Adaptive test. It kind of feels deceptive. It's like you can see a question that feels easy and get in your head. Oh no, I'm seeing easy questions. The sky is falling, when really it might not mean anything. It was just easy for you, or it was experimental, or you're seeing hard questions and you feel like you're getting your face beaten, and that gets in your head. Anyway, what did the two of you do? Did you struggle with the mental pressure, anxiety, anything like that during the test? And what did you do to address it?
So this is the biggest reason I got a really bad score, and I talk about it in the video, and Charles knows this very well, which was the mental pressure got too much, and it ruined all my hard work, it ruined all my strategies. Nothing can help you. But there's a very famous quote by Roger Federer, and I'd like to talk about it. And he says that he's won 80% of his games, but he's only won 50% of the points. So the point he is playing is the most important point ever, and the point that's passed has passed. So the question you're doing is the most important one. Once you move on, forget about it. You cannot do anything. So if you worry about it, you will ruin the current one as well. So I think that should be a mentality you need to adopt to overcome this mental pressure, because it's very normal, it's very natural. It feels like everything depends on this one exam. You know, Harvard is only going to take me if I get an 805. But it's one exam, you can redo it. Breathe, do this question, just this question. That's all you have to do.
Iowa Scott, any thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. Pearl nailed it. You can only solve the question that's in front of you. So focus on that, do the best that you can, and then hit next and go, let it go. Yeah, just keep moving.
And while we have kind of sports analogies in here, a lot of, when we talk about test taking performance, a lot of things that we've learned from sports psychology apply very well to test taking, right? So how you might approach a big tennis match, basketball game, whatever it is, those approaches that athletes take are very similar to things that can optimize your performance on something like the GMAT, GRE, executive assessment. Interestingly, so Steph Curry, so if those of you are familiar with NBA, Steph Curry, basketball player, very high level one, he talks about being nervous before every game. And his comment about that, and you would think, I mean, this is a guy who's been playing in the NBA for, I don't know, 15 plus years, won 4 titles, blah, blah, blah. He still says he's nervous before every game. And he says that that's his body's way of telling him that this matters to him and that he's ready. And I think that for some people is a really useful way to reframe. Hey, if you're feeling nervous on test day, that's normal. Everybody feels nervous on test day. It's weird. I take tests for sport. I have no reason to care about my GMAT score, GRE score. I still get butterflies in my stomach walking into a test room. Allison and TTP, Scott, I don't know if it's the same for you, but like, I think those nerves are often good within reason. And I love what Pearl and I, Scott, are saying. Focus on the task at hand, but also acknowledge, hey, it's normal and it's okay. And just focus on what's in front of you. Allison, TTP, Scott, briefly, anything to add to that, or we can hop on to something else?
Yeah, it's totally normal. It's totally normal to feel nervous. As you said, Charles, it's your body's way of letting you know this is important. Hey, let's really get to work here. And the thing is, you're never going to know how you're doing. You may, but you really shouldn't think about it, right? It's very hard for most people to know how they're doing on the test. You could have prepared something like crazy, and you got a super hard question, and it's super easy for you. Whatever, anything could happen. It could feel hard, it's medium, it could feel easy, it's hard. There's no way to know. So just don't do that to yourself. Like, as everyone on the panel has said, like, go in and do the best you can, and that will optimize your score. And what I found is, like, telling people, like, why physiologically, like, this is real. Like, when you worry about the difficulty of a question, did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Is the algorithm penalizing me? Is it, you're using a bunch of your working memory to worry. So instead of deploying, your quote unquote brain, your working memory on getting questions right, you've literally rerouted critical resources to worrying. So now, instead of it being 100% online, I don't know, let's say your brain is now 78% online and 22% is worrying, did I get that right? Why do that to yourself? Like, why? Like, you can only lose. So as you prepare and you take practice tests, like, just train yourself. It doesn't matter. I'm going to do the very best I can. I'm not going to worry about how I'm doing. I'm going to solve the question in front of me, and that will maximize your score.
And Allison, I have a feeling you have thoughts on kind of the anxiety and test day piece. I'll add kind of a broader question here from Aparna. So just more generally, like, why is it that we perform well in practice, underperform full-length mocks, actual exam? How do you overcome this? Anxiety is obviously one chunk of it, but if there's anything else you'd like to toss in the mix, go for it.
Yeah, so I wanted to build off what folks were saying, and I think this relates to making that transition from practice exams to your official exam. There's a lot of practical things that you can do to help respond. It's very true. It's your body's physiological response telling you this matters. I love that. You can talk back to your body. And I think that it's really important when you're in that training phase to start building some practices that you can call upon in the moment during the GMAT. So big one is just taking a deep breath, literally fueling your brain with oxygen. That's going to help you do perform better, in terms of your cognitive capacity. Practicing techniques like relaxing all of your face muscles or relaxing, your back or your feet or something like that. I personally found it really helpful to go for a jog but the morning before my GMAT, because that boosted my endorphins, got my mindset in a good place and got some of those jitters out. And we have a lot of students who benefit from practicing meditation and mindfulness so that they can, a lot of folks mentioned, like, you'll notice those thoughts coming in and they're taking up space. And meditation practice will teach you to see those thoughts and then, let them get carried away like a cloud in the sky. And so I think if you are experiencing those gaps, that would be the first area I would explore, is to start trying some different things, that you do during your practice that can then carry over and be kind of automatic habits on your test day.
Okay, I'm getting some questions in here about repeat test taking. And the questions are coming fast enough in the Q&A. I'm struggling to find it again to pop it on the screen, but we'll start with Pearl and/or Scott first. One question that popped up was, what is the optimal amount of time to take between attempts at the exam? And I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that. But I guess, is there anything for you two that really struck you as you were going through your prep, that after one attempt you said, oh, here's how I'm thinking about when it's time for me to go back in for the next one?
I think for me, after my first exam, I knew that the mistakes that I had made were not kind of knowledge gaps. I could see in the practice tests leading up to it that I was scoring at or above my target score. So I knew the knowledge was there. I just let sort of the test anxiety and things get to me on that day. And so I knew I didn't need to sit and study for, a couple more months to get the knowledge. I just needed to practice kind of relaxing and taking a deep breath like we've all kind of talked about here. So I think I sat for it, a couple weeks after, but I think it is kind of different and depends on why the first test for you or whichever test was kind of lower than you were expecting, or, what is leading to needing to retake.
Pearl, thoughts on this?
Essentially the same, but I didn't trust myself and I didn't do it immediately. So even though I knew that the first exam I scored poorly because of the mental stress and the anxiety, I didn't have that faith in the work I put in. So I took it after roughly 2 years. But if this is why you did it, I think you should just take it within a week or two. And if there is a knowledge gap, then of course you should work on it. But mostly I feel most people just talk about the anxiety being such a big factor for why they didn't do as well.
One thing I want to point out, just to do my best to embarrass Iowa Scott and Pearl here, I think part of what, and you two are welcome to interrupt me and yell at me and tell me I'm wrong here. I think part of what led to their success, both of them, is there's a lot of self-awareness, a lot of self-knowledge, a lot of introspection that I think went on over the course of this process. So it's interesting hearing, and obviously I know a lot of your stories already. It's interesting hearing Scott say, yeah, I knew exactly why that first exam didn't go the way I wanted to, and I didn't need a lot of time necessarily to correct it. And Pearl saying, yeah, I waited 2 years because here's what I understand about myself now. And it's one of those things we see when we do these debriefs, and Scott and TTP, Scott and Allison, I'm sure you see this too. Like a lot of your students, maybe particularly for TTP, because your course is self-paced, right? So people who are using a self-paced course, I think the ones who break through, whether using a self-paced course, self-study, a live course, or tutoring, it's when you really get to know yourself and get to know how your brain works that I think really good things happen. I think at a disproportionate pace, and that's the hard work that sometimes you have to put in. All right, topic here for we'll start with Allison on this one. How do you think about switching from GRE or switching to the GRE if you're struggling with the GMAT? So this particular question is more around quant being weaker, but maybe more broadly, because I'm sure other people have this question. If you're hitting walls on the GMAT, like how do you think about the GRE switch?
Yeah, we do find that the GRE can be a good option for folks who are really, really struggling with the time management piece on the GMAT and the anxiety that comes with a question adaptive test, because the GRE is section adaptive. The content in many ways is very similar, but the GRE does have a heavier load when it comes to vocabulary. So thinking about whether that is an area that you're willing and have a strength in studying. But I think the best thing to do is to take a GRE practice test and get a feel for what those questions are like, and whether that feels like something that you would be more comfortable studying. And then of course you want to check that your target schools are going to accept the GRE. So those would be that's my 2 cents.
My dad, in checking the median scores for both the GMAT and GRE, making sure that you're aware of kind of where you fit relative, I think is pretty important there. TTP, Scott, this question for some reason is calling your name to me. Quant and DI, I understand the concept while studying, but at a certain threshold of difficulty level, getting stuck. So again, you can take this question pretty literally to be about quant or DI, or just more broadly, like when you see students hit a plateau and they're going, wait a minute, I've flatlined here. What do you recommend they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it happens often. Like we tend to call it the difficulty ceiling. And, the answer has a lot of different nuances to it. It kind of depends why it's happening. One thing I'll see often is, for example, this is one archetype of student who will fall into this, issue where they skip easy questions, they skip medium questions, and they go right to hard, or they go right to medium and hard and skip the easies. And it's almost like, yeah, they read the solution to the hard question and they understood it and they understood that question, but they didn't really build durable skills that will transfer over, right? So like in that case, you got to go back. You have to relearn the information better, build the content, build the skills. Can I solve easies at a 90-95% accuracy? Can I solve the mediums at like a 80-85-90% accuracy? What happens when I get to the hards, right? That's something I see often. Assuming that that's not you, assuming that you genuinely have, like, go to the other end of the spectrum, assuming you have, gone through this stuff, you probably just need more work. And, like, this is probably my most common theme that sort of innervates everything. More work, more study, more error review will really do wonders for you. Like, it'll clear up like 90% of the issues you're having. Is getting stronger with the content, getting better with the material, practicing, reviewing, right? So sometimes it's a boring answer. I know that's not probably the answer we want to hear, but like, it's the truth. And this is after seeing, like, I don't know how many students, like years and years and years and years of them. Like, if I could make them do one thing, it would be to study more. Yeah, you got to study smart, but everyone at this level is studying smart. I don't think there's anybody watching this who's not studying smartly and efficiently. So then you got to actually put into work to build that base. Like, the bigger that content strategy knowledge foundation is, like, the bigger that pyramid is going to be able to grow. So that's probably the most applicable solution to get that difficulty ceiling question. Is instead of focusing on, the tip of the pyramid, you back it up, you rewind it, and you say, okay, how big is the base? Maybe if I make the base bigger, I can actually make that apex higher.
All right, we're down to our last couple of minutes here. Very quick one about non-quant data sufficiency questions on data insights. No, it's funny, TDP Scott and I were kind of riffing about, the old GMAT, nobody cares, that's in the past. This might be one of the funny exceptions where part of what you're experiencing as a test taker right now does have something to do with the switchover that happened in 2023, 2024. The only, as far as I can think of off the top of my head, the only completely new question type that appears on the current GMAT that didn't exist before 2023, verbal-based data sufficiency questions. There's not very many in the official guides. So what do you do about that? How do you prepare? Pearl and Iowa Scott, quick thumbs up, thumbs down. Did either of you struggle with these disproportionately? Were they an issue for you, something you focused on? If so, hop in for a quick 30 seconds. I think I see Iowa Scott nodding.
Yeah, these were super, super difficult for me. I think they're just hard questions, to be honest, and people can tell me differently, but for me, they were really difficult. I think you kind of have to fall back on your verbal skills and practice like they're a verbal question in a way. They're just hard, to be honest with you. I don't have a great answer besides just practice verbal and kind of treat them like that in a way.
I think what I might add to that is be careful, because there are so few. Don't binge on all of the official ones too quickly if you're trying to get better at them. There's also, I think of about, I want to say there's 2 or 3 dozen in the official guides, including the practice tests. I think we went through all of them, and it's a few dozen. It's not very many at all.
Charles, you muted yourself.
I am muted. Fat fingers.
Oh, you're back.
So there's only a few dozen out there. And because those questions hadn't been tested before they were released into the wild, into the official guides, 4 of them have mistakes in the answer key. So I think that helps warp it even more. I would recommend, what GMAT has said publicly is they are introducing more of those questions into the official guides, into the practice tests. So if you're really concerned about them, try to buy a newer edition, not an older one. It should have a slightly higher percentage of those. All right, we are hitting the end of our time. So we'll wrap it up here. This is a pretty easy one, I think. How do we in touch with you all for learning more? Allison Bell, you can find her, Manhattan Prep, not too hard to find. Scott Woodbury Stewart. Scott is great about being responsive to everything. So GMAT Club, Reddit, LinkedIn, I don't know. I feel like I run into you everywhere. It's a good thing. Very, very easy to find at TTP. Pearl, I cannot offer to have you keep in touch with her. That's up to her. But she does have a debrief here at GMAT Club. So we'll try to toss a link into the video description. Maybe somebody from GMAT Club can toss it in now into the chat. But go watch Pearl's debrief, make comments if you'd like. And Iowa Scott will be doing a podcast episode with us here at GMAT Club. So keep an eye out for that on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Scott will be telling a story. So if you want to learn more about those two, that's the way to do it. All right. That's it for today. Allison, Scott, other Scott, Pearl, thank you so much for doing this with me. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and have fun studying.
Thank you, Charles.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.